Welcome back, delegates, to our last session for today, but definitely not the least. I'm personally looking forward to the session where Ms. Joyce Nkini Iwisi will be discussing or presenting on managing projects remotely. Joyce is a director in charge of the investigation and forensic accounting practice in Johannesburg with a remit for the sub-Saharan African region. She has more than a decade of combined experience in forensic investigations, auditing, and strategy management. Prior to joining Control Risks, Joyce worked for two of the big four audit firms in East and South Africa and headed the forensics division of one of South Africa's oldest law firms. Joyce specializes in forensic investigations and strategy advisory. She has experience in servicing clients across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Joyce was recognized as one of the top 50 women in management in 2019. Joyce specializes in assisting clients with proactive and reactive solutions in the form of forensic investigations and fraud risk management advisory. Joyce works with clients in various industries, including inter alia, financial institutions, government regulators, and state-owned entities, NGOs, mining, and technology companies. Over to you, Joyce. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Boyo. I don't know who you were talking about there, but thank you very much. Really good to be on this platform today and to be interacting with the delegates during such a critical time for just the world in general. We have been fortunate or unfortunate to live through a period where we have had to adopt quite quickly in a somewhat different way than we traditionally know to conduct investigations or fraud risk solutions for our businesses and for our clients. So it's really such an utmost pleasure to just share some learnings that we have had over this period and just talk through with just colleagues in the industry regarding just some key considerations we need to take account of during the way that we conduct our businesses during this time. So we will all remember that dreadful period towards the end of March when Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, announced that we were going into a state of just the pandemic and a lockdown. Level 5 was what it was, and we all were panicking about what that's going to look like just in the way that we work. How prepared were we to continue? And I'm sure many of us just handling issues such as investigation shared the same panic across the board. So as control risks, we manage clients across the globe. In South Africa, as Vuyo mentioned, I am responsible for managing a number of clients spread around the region, the African region. So I will start from just a broader scope of seeing how we have been able to learn from the different aspects of investigations in the different regions within Africa, and then more specifically within South Africa, what that has looked like, what kind of learnings we have, the reflections that we have, because it most likely looks like we might need to adopt this kind of running for investigation, just not now, but way into the future. What the pros are, what the cons are, what's been advantageous for within organizations and for us as consultants on the outside. So just first and foremost, what we have learned over the period is that we've seen a high increase in whistleblower claims, mostly through whistleblower lines. We have received concerns from our clients, not just locally, but globally, about how there's concerns in respect to misuse of company funds, company resources. We've heard of situations where, whether it is because of the constraints that we've had in terms of accessing some day-to-day oversight that we would usually have, but we have gotten reports of just credit cards or company corporate cards being used much more by individuals, and maybe there's that sense that there's just not that level of scrutiny as to the approvals, or just things. Hopefully, people are hoping that things are just going to fall through the cracks in respect to accountability and oversight. But there's definitely been just concerns in respect to misuse of company resources. We have had to look at just in the way that businesses conduct investigations internally, supporting clients with remote interviews, preservation of data. I've heard during this conference a lot has been spoken to in respect to GDPR and POPIA, and just preservation of confidentiality of information. That will also touch on quite a bit because those are considerations that we've had to deal with in the way that we basically just get data, contain it, process it, albeit remotely. So the travel restrictions that we have had have really limited the way that we conduct our ordinary business of investigations, and we have had to quickly adopt to now having to do it through video conference, somewhat similar to what we're currently doing now. And I'm sure just as colleagues across the board will just appreciate the difficulty it is, because traditionally we want to be face to face with our interviewees and just understand how they respond and read that body language, and just try to take that on in the way that we conduct interviews and gathering of our evidence and statements. Just quite broadly, as I mentioned, we have had the pleasure of servicing quite a number of clients in the African region. We've conducted investigations with a number of donor-funded organizations in the East and in the West of Africa. We have assisted a number of FMCG companies. And again, we have noticed that there have been concerns in relation to stock loss investigations, where there are cases of, just a few people working within warehouses and just not having as good security or as good enough monitoring of just observing movements within the stock processes within the warehouses for our clients. As mentioned previously, there have been concerns in relation to misuse of company credit cards that we have picked up on in the FMCG industry. For the donor-funded organizations, we have taken note that there has been a rise in financial misappropriation. We've seen that we've investigated matters in relation to fraudulent companies being used for personal gain of employees within those institutions, and that's all just in line to financial misappropriation. But again, issues of HR misconduct issues, abuse of office, or just the demeanor around just how things are being handled in respect to the pandemic, and how people are not being assisted adequately in the way that they function. And we've seen just investigations in that respect. We have also had a few challenges with servicing clients in the investment industry that have required us to visit premises on the ground. And again, I'll cover how you can mitigate those aspects and try to continue in a somewhat normal way of conducting business. If you need to do site visits, for example, site inspections of physical premises, and albeit all that's happening, you're not able to at this point in time, how you can encompassate your capabilities internally, or if you choose to spend the money on using a consultant to do it, how that can be done. Locally, we've also had the pleasure of just servicing some public sector institutions, looking at I'm sure this is something that many of us are familiar with: irregular expenditure, fruitless and wasteful concerns. But just, it's just going to be quite good to see how different sectors have adopted to managing projects remotely, and just key learnings that we can take away from that as we then continue into the way that we do business. So just in terms of key considerations, jurisdiction has been quite a sensitive issue for us, specifically in relation to data privacy, hosting of electronic evidence, how we process that electronic evidence locally, and it's evidence that has been processed or sourced from outside of South Africa and now has to be hosted in South Africa. We have had to engage with our colleagues in the legal fraternity just to see how we can navigate those concerns. It's something that I would really urge every one of us to just be mindful of, especially with things being done remotely. In our normal course of doing business, we would have had the pleasure of going on the ground in a certain jurisdiction to process certain evidence that we are collecting. But with the transition of how we are doing things remotely, it's quite critical that before you move into any preservation, collection of any data that goes outside the confines of South Africa, you seek legal advice in respect to what key considerations are there and how limited or otherwise you will be in the way that is processed. We have learned that we need to be quite careful in how we just collect the evidence that we gather, specifically looking at issues of remote interviews and looking into aspects of just managing and handling specifically suspects. Just the way that you conduct, for example, your interviews. Is it going to be a video interview? Preferably so. And if it's going to be a video interview, just setting the tone for how that's going to go about, alerting or requesting for permission from the suspect requesting that you need to record the meeting, and how, just being mindful that with the platforms that we currently have, as a presentation or as an interview is being held, the video recording button keeps, so constantly reminding the suspect, which in some cases might be a bit disruptive for the interview. And therefore, what you might want to look at is looking at an alternative way of recording it in a way that allows you to have that rapport with whoever it is that you're interviewing, in a way that's not too destructive, and in a way that's just quite productive for you as you take the interview that you are conducting. Quite critical is the way that you engage in just establishing a relationship. Specifically, we found with whistleblowers, we had serious concerns with one of our clients where there were safety concerns for a number of their whistleblowers, there were death threats, so life and death situation with just conducting investigations with whistleblowers, and just being mindful that although we would like to protect whistleblowers in a way that allows for them to be comfortable, provides them with the security that they require, for example, it's quite difficult and quite challenging to do that sort of assessment in respect to the concerns that they have when you are remote. So it's been something that, as part of the learnings, you have to really be careful about the kind of rapport that you establish with your whistleblower, and also just trying to sort of establish the intention of the whistleblower from the offset to be able to determine whether the whistleblower is actually a legitimate whistleblower or whether this is a malicious individual. And just imagine having to do that remotely. It requires a huge amount of planning and strategy, and just somewhat different dynamic from what would ordinarily be used to in a usual landscape of meeting with a whistleblower and trying to engage with them and trying to suss out and trying to ask a number of questions that could land you at just that kind of assessment that will give you that determination. It's different. You have to we found that we've had to engage quite more closely with our whistleblowers, to try to rope them in, to allow to get that trust in them, to allow for just that transition into how you're going to work with them remotely. Because again, for them, it's a shock for them not to know what the system is like when you're conducting an investigation, but then B, now that you're a whistleblower, supporting an investigation and then having to do it remotely is something else. So another key consideration is just being mindful of cultural differences, whether it's outside of South Africa or within South Africa. You might be from Gauteng, you're investigating someone in KZN, different cultures, different languages. Highly recommended that as part of the team, you have someone within the team that understands the culture of whoever it is that you're going to interview, just to make sure there's that rapport that's established between the team and whoever it is that you're conducting interviews with. I am informed that there are some platforms that offer passwords for meetings. So if you need to have your meeting or your interview in a highly secure manner, that's an option. We haven't been able to implement that because we have not had a crucial need to go to that level of saying we need passwords and all that type of stuff for our meetings, but it's something that perhaps is a point of consideration if you do find yourself in that situation. And then, of course, if there's, as we know, sometimes interviews can take up to 4, 5, 6 hours. Just be mindful of taking, just some comfort breaks, mindful of just your general environment. Treat it as if you are in a professional environment, in a professional meeting. Dress up well, just be prepared. Avoid, just long baggy pants or PJs or whatever, for your interviews. And then also just be mindful of just the internet connectivity, and try to see whether you can facilitate for whoever it is you're interviewing to be in an environment on their end that allows for a good communication connectivity wise. So just a few stats regarding what has happened during this period. We have just looked at the ACFE COVID benchmarking survey that was taken, and just quite generally, there's just almost a general consensus that respondents felt that there's going to be an increase in cyber fraud. So if you are part of organizations within industries, just encourage, and I'm sure as fraud practitioners, you've taken that into consideration, but just encourage to just continue making sure that your IT systems are quite secure, specifically with people working remotely. We have had, as I mentioned previously, that there has been an escalation in fraud between April and May, and crime is what it is in our normal South Africa. So we do understand just how the stats have been playing throughout. So just a really cause for concern with everything that we know, everything that we're hearing about in relation to just the procurement, flaunting of procurement irregularities. We have many people are quite familiar with what the term is now, the COVIDpreneurs, and investigations in respect to those cases will be taking place. But again, the stats that we are seeing speak to what we're actually seeing over the immediate impact of the pandemic, and something that we expect to see towards at least the next year, coming as a result of the pandemic that we had to encounter. Just in terms of our usual investigation life cycle, with a remote investigation setting, what we have noted, so what we have currently on here is just the normal investigation cycle that most of us would be used to having as part of our projects. But we, in red 3 and 4, what we've noted is that our investigations appear to be taking much longer now for the 2 last stages. And I will touch on what that longer means with specific sectors in the industry, and the reasons that we have been able to pick up on and how we can work towards that. So when it comes to just identifying touch points and just looking at the risks that organizations have, that's quite clear. It comes out quickly. When we start sort of planning and putting together the team and just having a strategy in place that allows us to then execute our assignment, we face such a huge challenge just obtaining of information. It's just something that takes much longer than what ordinarily it would take. So you forget an instance in our previous worlds where you'd be able to just go into a client office and have as many documents as you'd like scanned, or you'd do your review of documents 3-4 weeks, depending on the case that you're dealing with, close it and finish and move on. We are having longer time periods to look into issues because we have to be patient in how we set up that sort of engagement between ourselves and our clients. There is a client we currently assisting in a number of African countries, and we have, when we planned our investigation rollout, because of the whole remote investigation setting, we were quite clever in coming up with Microsoft Teams forms that would allow whoever is on the ground in the client premises to take a picture of the supporting document that we need, upload it onto the Teams, and then send it directly to us. And we thought that was like going to be a tool that is highly efficient. But we had such serious challenges with that form of doing business because we found that, whilst the tool was a fantastic tool, just adoption to change took much longer in the way that we would have ordinarily liked. So there we are having people on the ground in certain remote locations in other parts of Africa, and you'd expect that this is going to be a quick and easy way, but because it's a new concept, it takes much longer in being absorbed, and we have had to then somewhat direct that and channel it differently in the way that we receive documents by setting up FTP sites, so file transfer programs that allow for us to have a secure way to just ask our clients to scan, upload, and send the information to us directly, rather than use some sophisticated tools that again hinder that process of change, allowing for what we would have hoped was going to be an accelerated outcome, but is otherwise then leading to a bit of a challenge in getting information. So just be mindful of just change management and how that change is going to be received in the whole new way of working on investigations. We also then, as I discussed earlier, interviews are also quite key in the way that we conduct interviews, and that what that means, information that is provided, how that's provided, the rapport that you create, the availability of individuals now that they know things are remote sometimes has been favorable, because whilst in our previous settings, you'd have individuals say, oh, actually I'm not available in a certain province, and then you have to chase each other. And so now it's different because it's now a phone call or it's a video call. It's it's been favorable in some instances, unfavorable where you have individuals that say, oh, I don't have access to the internet, or I don't have access to certain environments that allow for a video call. So just mindful of those considerations. And then with the reporting, as you know, with our type of work, our reports would ordinarily go to a board committee, an audit and risk committee, and that again is something that we have found takes a long period of time. Just having that back and forth. Ordinarily, you would have liked to do a presentation, physical presentation, comments are returned, and that's it. You file a report, it stays with the client. But just getting that chance with everything that's happening within organizations to sit down and have that deliberation has been quite limiting, and it takes much longer. So the reporting just generally has been a much longer process in respect to remote investigations. And just, internally, I think it would be best to work out a schedule of some sort that allows to have reports accelerated, dealt with, and move on to the next act of business. Yeah, so we have seen unique problems to various types of industries. We have seen that within the public sector, we faced quite a number of challenges with excuses or just feedback of just team unavailability, documentation that's unavailable, or just us having some concerns in relation to the documents that have been presented to us, the integrity of those documents, because we would like to review original documents. And that's something that we have flagged as just a serious challenge for organizations conducting remote projects, that the integrity of the documents that you receive and how you can sort of work on that basis in a way that gives you comfort as an investigator. In the private sector, although we found that clients are more responsive, they are more focused on the challenges that they have. There has been a general sense from within businesses, quite generally, in trusting what the new internal controls are that allow for the new mode of working to continue effectively. And because of that, we have seen a bit of hesitance in relation to just acceptance of investigation processes, because there's just that trust factor that keeps being pointed out. And it's almost one of those things that, it's a new way of working. And so we have to sort of come up with immediate solutions. And those solutions need just stakeholder buy-in. And stakeholder quite generally are your employees and other individuals that are involved in the runnings of your organization. And without that, it presents a bit of a challenge when you investigate, because you're not able to get the type of level of cooperation that you would have ideally wanted. So we've also just noted that there's a bit of a limitation in just getting issues addressed directly. And because of that, then on the back of that, we've seen instances where these issues have now been pushed further to become, again, issues to investigate in respect to just the preparedness of organizations. And now, there's risks of issues then becoming labor-related issues, and that sort of thing. So it's really important that as we work within our day-to-day business, we try and buy that trust with our stakeholders, try to react more proactively to the situation that we found ourselves. Unfortunately, no one could have seen it coming, but with what it is, we have to make a leeway to how we just react to the situation. Donor-funded organizations, as I mentioned previously, misappropriation of funds, and just issues that have led to labor-related issues as well. I'm just mindful I might be running short of time, Vuyo. Yeah, just one key consideration in respect to just obtaining evidence remotely, quite key, is how we just conduct remote collections from where it is that we're situated, to make sure that the way that we conduct it just make sure that data privacy considerations are taken into account, the way we process and review data. What we have found that it's quite critical to have someone on the ground, on the client premises, that can be trusted to assist us to plug in a hard drive and for us to basically be able to just transfer that information and review it as possible. Again, considerations of chain of custody need to be well managed in a way that allows for the integrity of the process to just remain intact. So just some key considerations, just looking at your key data source, looking at your custodian and their availability, the data transfers, and it's also very important to note that there's no one size fits all. And ultimately, when you do manage to get to a process where you're able to obtain the information that you require, encryption of the data in transit is quite paramount in a way that it preserves the integrity of the data that is being presented. And then one last point is on just the use of business intelligence on the ground. If you're unable to physically be in a certain location, make sure you have a contact of intelligence officers that are able to be trusted in a way that you know is quite key in the way that you conduct your evidence gathering. If you need to do site visits, for example, if you need to do warehouse sourcing and that sort of thing on the ground, trusted intelligence officers on the ground, competent, well vetted, are quite critical in the way that you just sort of cover that aspect as you conduct your remote investigations. Vuyo, I'm sorry for just taking a bit more time than I'd hoped to, but I think I'll just end my presentation there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joyce. It appears that we don't have any questions for this session from delegates. But I'm just interested in a question from my end. I think on your earlier slide, you had mentioned jurisdiction and the collection of information from different countries. How challenging has that been? Because now the POPIA Act is in place and entities have up until a year, if I'm not mistaken, to get up to date or to be able to confirm that they are compliant with the Act. But in your experience so far, how easy or how challenging has it been to get information from outside of the country and then manage that information or data according to our laws?
So, Vuyo, yeah, it has been quite challenging, but what we did do is establish just local counsel in whatever jurisdiction we engaged with, manage that process accordingly. So just obtaining of the data has to be well managed through whoever is legally advising you on the ground, specifically in relation to the hosting of the data in South Africa. That becomes a bit, because then you're you're getting across borders, and you have to be mindful of that because you have regulations in South Africa, but you also have regulations from the country that the data is coming from. So it is quite key that you have legal advice in that respect. And then you should be fine. But as as you'd know, where it is commercial company information, then that's something that you definitely have access to. Just need to be careful with how that is carried over.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much, Joyce, for sharing insight and practical tips and what you have experienced, especially during lockdown. And as a token of our appreciation, we'll be sending you a Take-A-Lot voucher from the ICFP so that you can spoil yourself. We really do appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to come and just share your knowledge and wisdom. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Thank you, Vuya, and thank you to everyone. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thanks. Well, delegates, that brings us to the end of day 2 of our conference. I would just like to thank you for participating in the different sessions we had today. And also remember that tomorrow's our last day and there's still more vouchers. So please, we start 8:30 tomorrow morning and I'll see you then. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and your evening. Bye.